Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Isabel Fish. I am your host today, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you. I am also the founder of Rubigal, and we are a company that promotes, supports, and nurtures craft and the makers. I passionately believe that makers and craft are a fundamental part of our community and our society, and we do everything we can to support them. Rubigal is also a club for women, and some of our members are here with me today. We see ourselves as patron of craft and of the makers, and in everything we do, we support and promote the makers. Sometimes we do it by traveling, sometimes we do it with conversations like today. We do tour studios, and we also have emerging philanthropic activity in supporting makers, in particular young makers. And if you want to know more about it, you can find all the information on my website, and you can email me. Today, it is my great pleasure to welcome three giants of the silversmith world, Nan-Nan Liu, Michael Lloyd, and Rob Kelly. And they are featured in the exhibit put together by the Goldsmiths Fair, Designs on Silver. To introduce us to this exhibit, we have no one else but, of course, the curator of the exhibit, Dr. Dora Thornton, who is curator of antique and contemporary silver, modern jewelry, and art medals at the Goldsmith Company. I'm now going to put the spotlight on Dora so you can all see her. Dora, welcome. It's a great privilege to have you. I am delighted that when I connected with you and said, let's do something, let's talk about this exhibit, you said, yes, of course, let's do that. So thank you for being with us, and I'm looking forward to discovering the other makers that you're going to share with us and the genesis of this exhibit.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. And I hope you can see the beautiful launch screen of our exhibition. I hope some of you have looked already at the exhibition Designs on Silver. It's a really beautiful show. You're going to speak to you have chances to ask direct questions of some of the makers included in the show tonight, which is very exciting. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what they're going to say. The aim of the exhibition is really very simple. It's to get you that little bit closer, using all the advantages of the digital platform, to the world of the contemporary British silversmith. And we want to do this through the medium of the design drawing. We have some wonderful design drawings to share with you. They're all drawings for pieces in our collection. And what we've done is put the design drawings or the models next to the finished pieces in our collection so that you can see the journey from idea and concept to reality. What I think it shows more than anything is how drawings show a maker feeling their thinking. They show you the world of their imagination. We have every variety of drawing to share with you. So when you get onto this page, this first page here, you see a wonderful drawing by Michael Lloyd for a piece in the exhibition on the bottom left. Louis Osman's beautiful drawings. I can hear somebody else in the background.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute people.
Beautiful drawings at the top by Louis Osman from the 1960s for wine glasses and silver, which are in our collection. And on the right, a beautiful triangular watercolor design for enameling by Ros Conway. And all we ask you to do is have a look at this page and click on a drawing of your choice. And what you get is taken into the world of that piece, the story of the maker, the story of that one object. And I think it increases your sense of wonder. The pieces that we've chosen, just 3 of them to introduce the exhibition, are ones that convey a very, very strong sense of place. And that's, I hope, what you'll take away from it. So the first piece is Ros Conway's wafer box from 2008. And this is a special commission by the Goldsmiths Company, really to show that ecclesiastical silver, that is silver made for English churches, doesn't need to be boring. It can be fresh, contemporary, and reveal the world around us. So this is a triangular wafer box designed to hold the consecrated wafers used for Anglican Eucharist. And the triangular form of the box, which is made in silver by Clive Burr, everything about this box and its design and its patterning is relevant to its function. So it opens up in two parts to reveal the box inside for the wafers, but it's triangular. It's got these three intersecting circles on the lid, and it has a triangular section at the center, which has three swimming fish around it. And I'm afraid the pictures of all of you have obscured the right of the screen, which shows a lovely trial piece for those fishes swimming around, but you'll have to take my word for it, they're there. And the inspiration is very particular, because Ros Conway lives in Suffolk. For many years, I believe she lived on a houseboat on the River Deben, and she's now built a beautiful house and garden for herself in Suffolk. And this piece just exudes a sense of Suffolk for those of you who know the county. And it's an autumnal palette. She's looked at the riverbanks and taken the wildflowers, in this case the dandelions and the wild carrot, in their autumnal form as they're seeding. And you can see that in these delicate enamel designs in basse-taille and cloisonné enameling on the lid. And in the center, you see one of her outline drawings for the enameling on the lid. If I show you the next picture, this is one of her exquisite drawings in the exhibition for that piece, which show you closer those three concentric circles of designs and the beautiful way in which she's going to work up the dandelion heads. And finally, I think one of the test pieces for one of those circles on the lid, showing the cloisonné enameling building up with these silver wires to hold the enamel in place. Beautiful colouring, and one of her exquisite drawings on the right. So from this sense of Suffolk, so strongly conveyed through the drawings and the making of this wonderful piece, we move to Shetland. And I'm very sorry that I think your view of this vase is cut off at the right-hand side, which is a pity. This is...
Dora.
Yes?
Dora, sorry. I think we can see it perfectly clear.
Oh,
it's
good.
your view.
You can see it.
It's your view that you have chosen.
Oh,
so
I'm
you
so
can
glad
hide
you can.
everybody.
Oh, I'm so glad you
Yes,
can
you
see
can.
it. It's an exquisite piece. This is the Shetland vase by Sheila MacDonald from 2013. This also is a commission by the company. And I think Sheila's watching this evening. She's here because we're going to hear from her husband later this evening, which is very exciting. So this vase is inspired by the landscape of Shetland, where Sheila MacDonald lives and works with Rod. The asymmetrical form of this hand-raised silver piece just suggests, I think, the cliffs of Shetland with this beautiful lip at the top. And everything about this piece conveys not just the landscape and the birds, but the weather and the atmosphere of Shetland as this island outpost. You see the design drawing for the birds in flight on the left, and then you can see how that's been translated into the silver on the right. You can see the acid etching of the silver, which gives it that fantastic sense of weathering, of wear and erosion. And I hope you can also see the beautiful monochrome enameling in white and grey and black, with these layers of enameling, successive enameling layers, with gold and silver foil laid over the enameling, which has been scratched through when it's cold to give that sense of the birds' feathers and wonderful weathering of the whole scene. I wanted to show you some of her exquisite landscape watercolours of Scotland. So on the left is one of Crail in Scotland, but on the right is the very workshop where I believe Rod is now. Is that right, Rod? Isn't this where you are right now?
It is. I'm looking out at the sea at this very moment.
Well, isn't that wonderful? We're showing you your wife's watercolour of where you are right now. And then she works from these drawings and works them up to give this sense of place. And here you can see the very beautiful drawings for the birds in pencil and the test pieces of enamel showing how the acid etching works on the surface of the silver and how she's building up those layers of enamel to get that sense of texture, which is so powerful in this piece. And then from Shetland, we move yet again. Now we're in Cornwall. this piece takes us to a very specific landscape in Cornwall, because it's again a commission by the Goldsmiths Company, but this time it's commissioned by one of our prime wardens, Michael Goldsworthy. And it's a functional object because it's an hourglass, which is for use timing speeches at dinners in the Goldsmiths Hall in London. And he wanted to bring a bit of Cornwall to those dinners, to those meetings and trade events at the Goldsmiths Hall. And so he's actually used sand from one of the beaches at Trewithen on his Cornish estate inside this hourglass as use as a timer. And now this is made by Jane Short and Clive Burr, who so often work together. So the silver sections, silver spun in sections is done by Clive Burr, and the enameling and the engraving is done by Jane Short. And it's a wonderful partnership. They've made many pieces in the collection together. This is just one splendid example. If you look at the design drawing on the right, you can see exactly how Jane has worked out and annotated the iconography, if you like, the picture sources that she's going to use. There's the lovely swirling engraved open work of the silver at the top, suggesting waves at the top of the beach. And then you move down the beach and you get into the brackish seaweeds and the different colours of the seaweeds, the brown and the yellow and the green. And finally, you end up with the deeper waters of the Cornish coast. And that sense of colouring is so vivid on this piece. I just wanted to show you as my final slide, the mackerel shoaling in the enamel at the very bottom of that speech timer, so that every time it's used in the hall, it takes you straight to the landscape and the seascape of Cornwall. So it's a wonderful, wonderful piece. And what I really wanted to show you is, I hope, how these designs, and you'll see many of them this evening, take you really so much closer to the finished pieces. When you have design drawings or models next to the pieces, you understand so much more, and it increases your sense of wonder at the finished pieces and the skill of the maker. We did really want you to look closely. We certainly wanted to take you on a journey of imagination, but we also really hoped that we could show how important these drawings can be, maybe for inspiring patrons, inspiring collectors, but most importantly, to teach the next generation of makers. And that's exactly what we do at the Goldsmiths Centre and at the Goldsmiths Company. We train our own apprentices, and one of the ways we do it is by using the objects in the collection, like the ones I'm showing you, and these design drawings, to explain something of the design process and the importance of making to young makers. And we hope very much also that summer makers would give us more of their design drawings so we can do just this, share them with you. And this exhibition is just a taster for our very ambitious plans to digitize our collections and make them freely available to you online for the future. And that's something that shows our commitment to contemporary makers and our wish to advocate and advertise what they do. And it's part of our 700th anniversary celebrations in 2027, just to show who we are and what we do through the medium of the collection shared with you online. So I hope that this is an inspiring start to the much more important business of hearing from the makers themselves. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dora. How amazing. And I couldn't have dreamed of a better transition to Nan-Nan Liu, who is, can you unmute yourself, Nan-Nan, please, so we can hear you. And Nan-Nan is and has been a student of Rod, I believe. And you are also a young artist. We have today with you, Rod and Michael, the full lifespan of the life of a silversmith. And it's wonderful to start with you, because your process and your inspiration is so different. So you are in the exhibit showing a piece that is a vessel for which you didn't do a drawing, but you created a paper model. And is that the piece I'm seeing behind you?
Yes, the paper model. This actually is the first, well, would not say the very first paper model. It was the first paper sculpture I made while I was study in Bishopsland, I well, become to a silversmith wasn't a conscious idea. It was, when I was a student, I made a series of paper jewelry and miniature paper sculpture, because I fascinated about natural organic form and shapes. So start with something small, and this is the full scale of the paper model I made, the first piece. Yes, yeah, I always dreamed to make it. So before I made the actual silver piece, it was 8 years waiting and researching and finding the possibility to be able to make something like this in silver.
Right. So I'm going to share some images of your work, and some of them do show the process. So this one is showing us, in fact, a mix piece. Is that right?
Yes, this is a small miniature sculpture I made while I was studying university. This is made with tracing paper. I shaped the top wire, and then glued the rest of the paper onto the top layer. So that's how this form came out.
And I mean, I was amazed when I was talking to you to prepare for today, and you explained to me how you were cutting. So every little line we see is a piece of paper. And you told me that to make your paper model can take you a full month. So there's a whole entire month of work, even before you start getting to the finished piece. And when I asked you how many layers of paper, you looked at me like I was mad. I mean, why would you count? How can you count?
It's a very meditative process. It's in the way this is not well, sorry, it's I work with paper while I was working with something else, so it's kind of relaxing process for me.
Mm-hmm. You get into that zone, and you get into that repetitiveness. And you mentioned earlier that movement is something that inspires you very much. We can see it here. Can you elaborate a little bit? Why movement? What is it? Is it movement of anything? Movement of nature objects?
Yes, I did my degree. My very original idea was the tree ring that shows the age of the tree is about every year building up and then creating a fascinating shape. Since then, I did some research about how water movements and create the textures and the emotions. So I always interested something. What my work is have the subtlety, but also are bold as well. I want to, so kind of wanted to have both in my work.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you use, I mean, the paper modeling was right at the beginning of your career. Since then, you have moved on to different type of modeling. You use clay, for example. Do you have some of your clay models with you?
Yes, I guess you have a picture, photograph, but this is actual caddy spoon I designed and made. So I don't know if it's clear enough to see the text. I use the.
I'm going to share the picture.
Yes.
Here we go. Can you see the picture?
Yes, I can see very clearly. So, well, I find the beauty of my work is not just it is the movement and also the tactile texture. So I find if making a model, it's quite important to show how the texture going to appeal on the work. So I finally discovered this clay that they used for very miniature figure modeling, and it can shows very detailed and a very strong form. It can hold form very well. So this is this one didn't spend a month to make, so only a week, couple of days.
So when you do the process in itself, you create your clay model, and then what happens to it between the clay model and the silver object?
Well, clay model is just purely give me a rough idea how I constructing the form. So I have a better idea what size of silver and how many layers I needed, and this well, just give me a preparation before I get on to working with silver. So and also it's a good media to show the clients how they can visual what they are getting.
Yeah, so that's quite important. It's an important part of the process, particularly for commission, because this matching of the mind, or meeting of the mind between what the client has, you know, in his or her head in terms of what it is that they want and what you have, and to make sure that you have some freedom, creative license, but at the same time the client understands. So that creating that model must be very helpful in that sense.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Words the actual model. So I treat every model I made as a piece of art. I like to make it as real as possible, as close to the real the final piece as possible as I can.
Could I just say that? Sorry, Isabel, can I just say something? Nan-Nan, what's so wonderful about your models, particularly the paper ones, is that you don't know when you're holding the silver and the paper both together in your hand, which is the real one. They're both so beautiful. They're both works of art. And I have to say, she's incredibly modest, Nan-Nan, but you know, I just asked you, didn't I, Nan-Nan, because that bread basket that I think you showed at the beginning, made of the silver wire, Isabel, you showed that beautiful bread basket, which was commissioned by the company in 2016. And I just asked very innocently as a curator ever can, oh, do you have the model, the paper model for that? It's the first picture, I think, that you showed.
Here
That one, this beautiful bread basket, which is an exquisite work of art. And I just asked you, didn't I, do you by any chance have it? You know, could we borrow it for an exhibition? And what happened next? Nan-Nan arrived at Goldsmiths Company and presented this beautiful paper model to me. So it's now part of the collection. So that was part of that example of makers giving us material that illuminates something of the world of the silversmith. So I think you're being very modest, Nan-Nan, but you know, these are fantastic works of art, and to see the way you hold them in your hand is really inspiring.
Thank you.
So Nan-Nan, you absolutely put the finger on it, Dora. Nan-Nan is so modest that on her website there's absolutely nothing about her. If you go on her website, it's the only website I've ever seen that doesn't have an about section that I could read about you.
I will make a note on that.
I think we would love to know a little bit more about you, and where did you grow up, and tell me a little bit about that moment that you said, I want to discover Western culture. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in North China. My dad is a police officer, and my mom does something to do with architecture. So I don't have any artistic family background, but I somehow been directed to study, well, been advised to study accountancy for a year. And after a year, that is a year very valuable to me, was I definitely knowing that's not something I want to do for the rest of my life. I always interested in art and creativity side of life. at the time, a friend of mine was living in San Francisco, and I was originally going to there, but somehow I ended up in UK, and that's a great instance that happened to my life. I've come to a silversmith. It's a wild journey for me, but it really is a blessing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would love to see before we start talking with Michael. I would love to see some of the pieces you have behind you, your candlesticks in particular, which are pieces that you have on your website and that are so unique and reflect that movement and that construction. Can you show them to us, to the camera?
This is randomly, I mold a clay to get the idea of what sort of curve and shapes I want to achieve. So there's nothing, it's just for myself. And so that's giving me idea. But if I present any idea to a client, I usually do a quick sketch, if that can show very well. So it's I do, my drawing is more about line and show the movement in the what's happening in my mind. So it just to kind of give an idea, and for them to tell me what kind of style they are looking for. Sometimes some customer more open to free, more free, how can I, flowing, and some maybe more prefer for more traditional shape. So that's
right.
just give me idea to start everything, and then I start with working with clay to give me idea how to construct the form. Yeah.
Right. There's a question in the chat box for you. Do you still make jewelry?
Yes, definitely. I still have I want to make jewelry for sure. Will be focused on paper, maybe some silverware, silver jewelry.
That's amazing.
I just haven't really planned anything out, just focused on commission at the moment.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And from this image of a tree, there's a very natural progression to moving to Michael. Michael Lloyd, thank you so very much for welcoming us in your house. We are in your house because your studio doesn't have Wi-Fi. You are in the middle of the countryside. Do you want to tell us where exactly you are?
Well, we live on the Galloway coast in what was a croft, which fortunately had a large dilapidated barn in the grounds when we bought it, which is now the workshop, which gives a really beautiful space to work in.
Right. And I did share the video that you sent me of your workshop, and I'm sure that everybody has that in mind. So for you, nature is everything. Nature.
It is, well, it's fundamental, yes. I think all the work really has sort of been a homage, I suppose, a homage to nature. Combined
and a homage, yeah.
Sort of compulsive maker anyway. So the two sort of fitted in nicely, just as a process of communication.
A homage is a very spiritual word in a sense, and that's very much the way that you approach your work, isn't it?
I think so, because I'm when you look at nature, and apart from the fact that visually you're looking at something that's taken sort of thousands of years to evolve. So there's the design element of it, which of course I find fascinating. But I think a lot of people who are living in the countryside obviously have this sort of spiritual connection, which you find, you know, when you're walking through forest, and it's that really that I would like to express, because I feel we live in a very spiritually undernourished world. So I suppose in some ways that's my justification for indulging and just being able to sit down and spend all my time making things that I love.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing that it's a good match for your passion also for music, which is how you start your day, and you have a very ritualistic way of starting your day. The music is really what grounds you to start, and that enables you to go into your work.
Well, the music is very helpful for me because it's the one time that I can really switch off and actually not think about what I'm about to make. Otherwise, I think what's terribly important when you start making, rather than daydreaming, I call my doodle dreaming, where the advantage of living in a fairly remote part of Scotland is that you don't have all the interruptions that I think a lot of urban dwellers would get. And just having the space and freedom really to dream about what you might be making up without sort of the external pressures of it necessarily having to be made up at a specific time or specifically for someone. So there's a freedom in this daydreaming that I think is terribly important. And it slightly worries me now that, with the younger generation that are so connected to all their IT gadgets, that something is lost. But
Right.
maybe that's just a grumpy old man talking.
Well, no, I think there's a lot of truth in there. And I mean, nobody fits better in that exhibit than you, because the drawing is central, absolutely fundamental to your practice. You mentioned that you do doodles, but I believe that you have three kinds of drawing books, and that drawing, in fact, is that second moment in your day when you are completely absorbed. The first one being the music, and the second one is when you draw. And maybe you can share that experience a little bit with us.
Well, it's an advantage. Obviously, well, choosing to live somewhere as beautiful as this was really, really essential, because I find, this drawing is so fundamental to me, just, to acquire information about, textures, colors, form, and I think if you don't draw, there's a great danger that you start sort of producing the cliche. And when you really examining how something is formed, well, there's a wisdom that really, I think, sort of comes from it that you can develop. So these are my first drawings, which are basically just sort of fairly straightforward botanical drawings.
Beautiful.
And these will usually sort of give me some idea of the form that I might want to make. So the second drawing, my second sketchbook, my sort of doodle sketchbook, is very often just forms and some rough.
Can you just show it again, but maybe not so close to the camera?
I don't know.
That's right. So these are just forms and shapes. That
yes,
is
fairly free drawings, where I'm not. The thing at this stage is you're not having to present anything to a client. The botanical drawings are not there to produce a finished drawing. They're just there purely to explore and to try and understand what's there. My doodle book is just to gain that freedom to explore some form. And of course, the slight disadvantage with working in metal is it is such a labor-intensive process that the more you can do two-dimensionally, really to work an idea out, before you then test it in 3 dimensions means that you're less prone to making you know, a lot of mistake, or you're getting slightly closer to what you're wanting.
And this drawing for you is a necessity. You mentioned the cliche because you really try to not reproduce what you are seeing, what you are observing, but to extract the essence of it, and I want to say almost the soul. And when you observe,
the idea of trying to reproduce is you would lose out right from the start, because when you look at nature, and the forms are so wonderful that it makes us sort of very, very second-rate really as designers. But I think if you can express the love of what you've been looking at, I think that's very important to convey. You know, and what you are making, I feel, is it's not just a 3-dimensional object, but it is, the idea is that you are communicating, and that communicating, okay, hopefully it is about the beauty of nature, but it's also about your involvement. And maybe the fact that you've spent, you know, 6 weeks or so trying to produce something, it's this slight sort of pilgrimage, which maybe gives some extra importance to what you've been looking at. I don't know, maybe that's one way I look at it anyway.
Well, I think it comes out in your work, obviously. And what is fascinating is that you do start, okay, you have the drawing and you have all that emotional involvement already in the piece, but then it comes down to that disc of metal, that flat piece of metal, and then again that emotional work and obviously skill work starts. And you are in love with silver, aren't you? You told me you love metal, and
yeah,
that's
particularly the malleability is, to me, is absolutely magic. The fact that, you know, just by hitting it in the right place, you know, you can take your flat disc and really, hopefully at some stage, make the form really sing. But also you're working to such subtleties that, you know, if you over-raise a piece, you can kill the form. So form to me is, you know, is very important in expressing an idea. But the other thing is when you have so-called, sort of, I'll say, sort of in brackets, completed a piece, the idea doesn't sort of end there. You might hand it on to the client, but it's sort of, you know, it's still ticking along. And what I was quite interested in this exhibition is one of the pieces that Dora chose was the Prime Warden's Commission, which had this rather lovely quote on it, which was from Octavia Hill, who she was one of the founders of the National Trust. Is
it this one?
That's the one, yes.
This piece?
That's the piece. And the inscription on it was the need of quiet, the need of air, the need of exercise, the sight of the sky and the things growing seem human needs common to all men. Well, I think in this period of lockdown, that sort of quotation became even more important to me. So I've really been sort of working on the inscription. I don't know whether it's coming the right way. So this is really I've really been trying to take it, probably concentrating a little more now on the lettering. I think letters themselves, and there's a wonderful character called David Jones, who is one of Eric Gould's apprentices, and his letters absolutely, the lettering absolutely dances across the page, and you know, really beautiful. So actually, I'm going to pick you up on a point, Isabella. You said that the 3 silversmiths sort of span the age of silversmithing. I'm hoping at the tender years of 70, I still have plenty of years left. So I'm hoping in the next maybe 10, 15 years, I can, well, maybe not master lettering, but get a little bit further towards realizing this idea that you have, and the incentive of making in some ways is you have an idea and you don't know whether that idea is actually going to work until you end up with a finished piece. And in some ways, if it doesn't work, that's the incentive to make Mark II or Mark III. So hopefully, you know, eventually you come up with a better communication, maybe.
But you told me that you told me that you are never happy with a piece, and
No.
that's that dissatisfaction that kind of propels you to do the next one. And if you were creating the perfect piece, then you would be so terrified of doing something else, of doing another piece, because it wouldn't be as good.
That's it. Well, I mean, if you've found the solution, there's no point in you know, pushing it further. Then you have to go somewhere else.
Right. I mean, I was going to ask you, you kind of answered the question, but I was going to ask you, you know, how once you've had a career as long and successful as yours, and you've done everything, and you are in every museum, and you know, your talent has been recognized and celebrated as it should, what is the next step, and how do you you know, what do you aspire to? But you've just answered. For you, well, now it's lettering.
I think start having grandchildren and children, you're very much sort of kept down to earth. So I think people laugh at that description. No, I'm at 70. I'm just very excited about you know, you gain a knowledge, and I'll just show you one other thing which I would love to try and get other students may be interested in. But normally with, you know, with silversmithing, you work when you're chasing, which is pushing the metal around, you're chasing in, I'll call it the positive. But if you chase a piece of metal in the negative and you put it through an etching press with paper, or in this case, I don't know whether you'll get, no, this isn't, I don't think this is going to show it up.
Not coming out very well.
No, it's not. What a pity.
Oh yes, we can see that. Yes, we can see that.
Where I've been
yes.
working on the book binding. And it actually, the relief is picked up beautifully from the chased metal. So there's still loads of directions, and you know that you want to take things a little bit further in.
So your technique is very specific, and I'm hoping that you have a cup that you showed me that shows that both the inside and the outside is actually embellished, and that's very specific to your technique, which I know that Rod also practices. Can you show us this and talk to us a little bit about this technique?
Rod will be saying the same thing, but see, the lovely thing about chasing is you're not imposing an image onto a form, but the imagery does actually become part of the form, because if you see the inside, what you're doing, and if you get a chance to look at any of the short films that I think, Isabel, you've put up, you'll yes. get more of an idea of the technique. The work is filled with pitch, and then you're with little hammers and punches, you're coaxing the surface into the relief. So that will push the inside, and you'll get a much gentler image sort of coming right. through on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Frances Gottschall has raised her hand. Do you want to unmute yourself, Frances, and ask your question? I think that's what you're intending to do.
No,
I can't see everything.
It's a mistake. I apologize. I pressed the wrong button.
That's okay.
My apologies.
That's quite all right. No problem. I'd love to go into the relationship with the client. You work a lot on commission, and in spite of the fact that you live in a fairly isolated area and you like to be in your studio, I sense that you are quite a people person, as we would say, and your relationship with your clients is important. Can you tell us about that relationship and what it entails?
Well, yes, the relationship is very important, and very often your clients do end up becoming quite close friends. We are, I hope it's the same with Nan-Nan, it certainly is with Rod, that our clients really don't tend to come to us until they know really the work that we make. So you automatically, you have some connection even before you've met them. What they tend to bring, I find, is their enthusiasm. And I feel incredibly privileged that they also come with sufficient funding to enable you to make up something that you want to make.
You told me the story of that piece. Sorry. You told me the story of a piece that you made for a young man, in memory of a young man who loved theatre, and I thought that was a fantastic story.
Well, that was a very special commission. A lovely family, but very sadly, the son, things hadn't gone well with him, and I'm afraid he did end up committing suicide. So I was commissioned to make a chalice, and the whole process of commissioning, I think, became quite an important part of the healing process. And the mother of the boy sort of gave me all his diaries and his CDs to listen to. So I had this young man who was called Hector. So while I was making the piece, I really felt I had the presence of Hector in the workshop. And Hector's sort of main interest was amateur dramatics. So we made a chalice, which actually the knob of the chalice was a stage. And the chalice itself is used each year. It's gone back to the school that he was a pupil. And each year, the chalice is used, apart from the fact that it's used in the school chapel, it's also used in a play. So I think and obviously in such a dreadful situation as losing one of your children, the fact that you could find some sort of positive outlet was incredibly important to the family. So again, to be able to be a sort of a link in that sort of process of healing, I think was quite a privilege.
Mm-hmm. And it's I think privilege is the right word. And the same way that you put the emotional element of the relationship with your client, you also put music as part of your work. There are some pieces that you told me the music is in there. You work with the music playing, and it's definitely in there in your piece.
Well, absolutely. Well, to be honest, I suppose my favorite composers are, well, certainly Bach, which is wonderful for making ecclesiastical pieces. You have a genius sitting right next to you, sort of playing away while you're meeting. And also, I love the French sort of impressionists, Debussy and Ravel and Fauré, and so again, once I'm in the workshop, I feel their connection to nature comes in. So yes, I live with music, which is terribly important. part of work.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that we're going to bring in Rod in the conversation. And I know that you are friends, and you also, I think, share a sense of adventure, because Michael, you told me that when, and maybe I'll put you side by side with the spotlight, that would be fun. So we can see you together. So Michael, when you went to school, you finished school, and you met your wife while studying, and the two of you decided that the smart thing to do was to buy a narrow longboat and fix it and go up and down the canals in France with students and teach them. And then in parallel, Rod, who went to the same school as you a few years later,
Yes,
who met his wife there too.
Because Rod was at
schools.
Birmingham before the Royal College, and it was at Birmingham that I met him first. So we go back quite a long way.
So Rod, you also met your wife at school the same way that Michael met Mary, but you didn't choose a narrow longboat, you chose a bicycle, and you and your wife you pedaled from Seattle to New York, and you thought that was a good idea too?
I think the honest answer was it was Sheila's idea, and I just went along to keep her company, really. But no, after the Royal College of Art, which is where Michael was, and Nan-Nan in London, Sheila was a jeweler and I was a silversmith. We took 3.5 months to cycle across the States on our bikes.
So that adventure, did it feed any of your first creations after that?
I was thinking about this today because I was walking out with the dogs by the sea, which is just below the house. I'm very much affected by the environment around me, and I enjoy walking, I enjoy nature. But to me, the biggest drive of making and designing is actually the relationships I have with the people that have commissioned me. So I'm affected by nature, but I don't think I actually, in the drawing and the making, I don't think nature is the first port of call, really. What I really enjoy is the relationship with someone that's commissioning something, the exchange of emails or postcards or letters, and it could take several years before something comes to fruition. But I like the dialogue with people, really, and I really enjoy making something that they will have and treasure and look after. I like their input, but I also like the struggle that I have to make sure that I'm designing something that I really want to make and that I think will be beautiful, whereas sometimes our ideas are at odds, and I like the challenge of bringing them round to seeing my way, often through sketches. So
right. I was going to say, let's maybe have a look at some of these sketches, and you can share. So this is where you are, which is absolutely amazing. This is a view of your house.
The small croft house is on the right, and the large wooden building on the left is the workshop, that's where I am now, yeah.
Right. And this is the piece that's in the exhibit, and we can see the drawing here of the fish on this jug, and here is the finished piece. Can you share that story with us, because it's really so unique.
Before I made the jug, I actually made a beaker, and a client who is still a friend asked me, would I like to go trout fishing, because they'd like to commission something. And I had never really been fly fishing before. So I caught my first trout with a fly, but I wanted the trout to be in quite tight curves, as if they're swirling through the water. So you don't actually naturally really see the fish do that. So with the trout that I caught and a couple of rainbow trout that I bought from a fishmonger's, I actually tied them up with elastic bands and put them in the freezer into the curves that I wanted to see. And then afterwards, I took them out of the freezer and I drew them in the curves and the shapes. So I observed nature, but I don't draw every day, and I don't keep a sketchbook. I find it quite difficult. A lot of people will say, where do you get your ideas from? And ideas don't just come naturally. You have to work at it. And so if I am faced with a commission and a blank piece of paper, I find it really difficult to get started. And like writer's block, I'll find myself doing anything from hoovering the sitting room or cleaning the fridge or doing something other than the drawing that I should be doing, because there's nothing worse than spending a whole morning drawing and then looking at the results and just being bitterly disappointed. So it's quite, drawing and designing and coming up with an idea is often quite challenging, quite difficult. But I do like drawing in itself. I just don't do enough of it.
Right. So I'm seeing a lovely piece behind you, and I'd love for us to have a little bit of a snoop around your studio and see this big piece behind, and maybe you can tell us what it is that you're going to draw on that. What are you going to do on that?
Something smaller I have in front of me, which is part of a commission, as well as making sort of functional silverware for people and presents, etc. I've made quite a lot for cathedrals and churches, and this is a particular commission for a set of morses for Norwich Cathedral. A morse is it's a big brooch that the dean and other members of the church will wear in big celebrations as they walk through the church with their copes, which is the big gown. So I've designed 6 morses that I'm making over a period of time. And so initially, these are the sort of sketches that I produce.
Can you, that's perfect.
So
yes,
they'll be on anything from, these are post-it notes that probably sit at the table while I'm having breakfast, to ideas of just sketches that I'll draw. And then that would lead on to some ideas. So in this particular design, so this is the actual morse itself. See if I can show that.
Yes,
so it's
great, perfect.
So it's in the shape of a cross, but because the copes are very cumbersome and thick and heavy, it's actually going to articulate. So it has sides that actually move. So when worn, it can actually articulate on the gown itself. And then each one of these will be chased with a different decoration in the middle and will be attached to the garment on either side. And this is the one for the dean. So from the first early sketches, I don't know weight wise, but it's not unduly heavy. The copes themselves that they wear are very, very heavy. And this would be the final artwork that so this is the artwork for the dean's cope, which is the sketch that I would then produce. And another sketch.
There's a question here for you from Stella. How are they fixed to the cope?
With catches. There's sewn in catches on each side of the collars of the cope, and then there are catches that simply fix on the back, silver fittings that fit on the back of a cope, so they can be easily taken off and removed after a ceremony. So that's another sketch, and these will be chased in low relief, which is the technique that I and Michael specialize in. So that it's embossed in the surface of the silver to produce a low relief decoration. And this is the final one. This is represents the library within the key cathedral. So it's just a set of Morses really, and these are the black and white sketches that I often come up with when I'm drawing. And then secondly, just,
I have a few, oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
I was going to say, I have a few images of drawings, but why don't we finish with what you have to show us, and then we will share images.
So sometimes commissions, as with the dish that I'll show you, are very grand, very large, but this is just a small commission. This is for a chef who's a Michelin-starred chef, and he's asked me to design and make a caddy spoon. So these would be the little sheets that I send, and this is, he's chosen this design on this side, and he's also chosen to have a fish. So this is the design that he's chosen. I gave him 3 or 4 options. So this is just quite a small commission really, but I will still do some quite nice artwork, and then he'll see the sort of thing that I'm going to chase in low relief. But the bigger commission I'm working on at the moment is quite a large, it's a pair of dishes, and this has been hammered from a flat sheet of silver. And on the back, you'll see there are wires here. These are going to be cut out eventually, but to give the piece still the strength while it's chased and the decoration is added, I've just blacked them out. So the actual dish itself will give the slight shape of a cross, and it's been hammered. So this is the hammer that I started with to block it from a flat sheet, and then it's refined to make it into a dish and then planished. And I'm very lucky to be able to use such things. This is a hammer from the Hart's workshop in Chipping Camden. These are copies of Ashby's hammers from the arts and crafts movement, and this would be one of my favorite ones. So having made the piece of silver, that I'm actually working on the design at the moment, and I can show you some of the first brief sketches. This is not so much a celebration, but really a homage to the First World War. And the dish itself, as I say, has a slight shape of a cross, but there are going to be 4 posts coming out of the middle in the shape of a cross. And then I've been looking at barbed wire, and there'll be large details of barbed wire working its way all the way around the edge. As it's quite a beautiful shape, even though it's quite a cruel piece of metalwork. And I'm treating the inside like an explosion, a bomb hole, and the poppies are going to grow out from the inside between the wooden staves, and then there's going to be a circle of barbed wire. So usually if I'm designing, I will start to sort of engross myself in the subject matter and read about it. So this is just the first sort of ideas of the posts and the barbed wire.
It's amazing.
So I will start sketches and drawings.
And sorry, I missed, who commissioned that piece? I mean, I missed that.
It's a private commission from a family who lost someone in the First World War. So and then there's a second dish, which is the First World War. So it's a pair of dishes. And so here's a sketch, possibly you might be able to see, of just the poppies and the barbed wire. So I'll work on ideas, and at the same time, I'll build up images. So I like to do a juxtaposition of the way shapes and patterns work. So I've got a lovely image here of 3 soldiers that are hand in hand, and I don't really like doing faces. And unfortunately for these 3 soldiers, they're all badly burnt, and they're holding each other's shoulders in a procession so they can actually find their way as they're walking. So I may use that as part of an image. So at the moment, it's very sort of early days of picking out ideas and images and drawings and slowly putting things together. So one of the things I'm going to include is the image of a postcard which has a postmark of France, of the Somme, and was sent back to England, and the clear postmarks are there. So in part of the image, I will have an image of the postcard. So it's not so much about a battle and war and guns. It's more just my interpretation of images that work together on a decorative plate that represent the First World War. It's quite a challenge, really. It's not the easiest of commissions, but it's something that I quite enjoy, and I enjoy the dialogue with the family and thinking of ideas. So I don't really go out with a sketchbook and draw nature, but I do like drawing and putting images together.
Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing that in your studio there's quite a bit of space, and you have several benches in your studio, and that is because you are very much it's very important to you to pass on your knowledge and to help young silversmiths. So tell us a little bit about how you bring young students or young silversmiths into your studio, how you give them access to knowledge. And I'd like to also say a word about the trust that you are creating.
Well, I know Michael had mentioned that with a fair wind and a good sail, he'll have maybe another 15 years of working. I think I probably feel myself that I've been working now, it will be 40 years in 2 years' time, I think. And I know from my hallmarks, I've made over 500 commissions. So I feel now it's time to actually I feel I've had my 15 minutes, and it's time to pass on the skills that I have honed and have to other young makers. So I have 6 benches in the workshop, and I've been very kindly at times funded and sponsored by various individuals. And I like to bring young people to the workshop for a month or 2 months. Or Manzi DePala, who's a young maker, won a Queen Elizabeth Trust scholarship, and she was here for 6 months. And I've also, during COVID, been raising money through a small trust that I founded. And we've now, my trustees and I have raised just over £30,000, and we are sending 6 young makers to work with established master craftsmen in this country so they can learn and hone their skills. So I'm very keen, really, that I pass on to the next generation all the things that I've learned. And I really enjoy working with young makers. They're very vibrant, have lots of energy, lots of ideas. And it's just lovely having them in the workshop and working alongside them.
And I believe that hasn't Nan-Nan be at your studio? Has she been there? I believe so. She has.
She came to Shetland so they're quite difficult to get to, because you have to take a ferry, a 12-hour ferry or a flight to Shetland. But no, Nan-Nan's been here, and we had lots of good times in the workshop, and trying to teach Nan-Nan some of the skills, as I say, but also Shetland cultural life. I remember taking Nan-Nan up into the hills on a quad bike, where we cut peats, which in Shetland you cast peats, ready for the winter. So we cut peats, and then they're stacked and stored, and that's how I fuel the heating in the workshop. So whenever lots of young... Carry on, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, when lots of young makers are here and they've got endless energy and they're physically fit, they're in the ideal place to take up into the hills to cast lots of peats.
I agree with you. I think that the more young people we have around us, and the better it is for us older folks. There's a question here about your training, and I skipped that a little bit, and I apologize, but how did you come to be a silversmith? What was your training?
Well, unlike a lot of people, my 2 brothers, they're 12 years older, were both university lecturers. So they suggested I went to university. So for A-level, I studied history, economics, and sociology. I didn't do art at school at all, but I could always draw, and I was quite interested in drawing. And I did a 2-hour art class while I was doing A-levels, and the art teacher, who was very young and had just come from art school, said my drawing was really strong and had I thought about going to art school. So I deferred my BA degree sociology for a year while I went to a one-year foundation. And that was when I did sort of a mixed metal course. And I then applied to Birmingham and went to Birmingham to do 3D design on a 3-year course. And I think 8 or 9 years before me, Michael was there, who was, I'd have to say, an inspiration. He once came to the workshop when I was an undergraduate, and he was living on a narrowboat then. And it was just, you know, in the presence of someone that really knew how to enjoy life. And so Michael's always been a massive inspiration. And then Michael went from Birmingham to the Royal College of Art. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I followed him like 8 years later. So we were the only two from Birmingham, I think, to go to the Royal College of Art. And that was a 3-year postgraduate course where there were only 4 in my year. And I spent most of the time with a wonderful silversmith called John Bartholomew, who taught me most of probably of what I know.
Mm-hmm. But the first, just to wrap up, I would love for you to share the story of the first pencils you used to draw with.
Well, it's quite, I knew nothing about art. I didn't know anything about perspective. I was so naive, it was unbelievable. But my father was an engineer and he worked for the government, and the government had free pencils and they had the Queen's crown stamped on them. I didn't even know you could get different hardness of pencils. So the first drawings I did were with a 4H pencil that they used in drawing offices. And if anybody knows what a 4H is like, if you press too hard, it cuts through the paper. And I didn't understand you could get softer pencils. I didn't realize there was an HB or a 2B. So all my drawing as a 15 and 16-year-old was done with a 4H. So, and when I first went to art school, I was so far behind. I had, as I say, I hadn't studied art at all. I didn't know what perspective was. I didn't know what color theory was. I still don't really. I only use 3 colors: silver, gold, and black. So well, it was a big steep learning curve really. But I was never happier. Doing A-levels in sociology, history, and economics was so dull and boring. A bit like Nan-Nan said about being an accountant. I knew that anything had to be better than that. So I very fortuitously found myself going to art school.
And we are so glad you did. Because we can enjoy your art and really learn and get inspiration and happiness, because really that's what makers and artists like you do. They bring happiness and beauty into our world. I would like to say that, as I mentioned at the beginning, at Rupigal, we have a philanthropic intent, and I'm delighted to say that we will be making a contribution to your trust, Michael, because Rod, sorry, because we really want to support a young maker, and it would be lovely if you could let us know and keep us informed of who is going to be your next student. I also want to say that we are absolutely planning to do a trip. Rupigal, we do bespoke trips around crafts and makers, and we absolutely intend to come and invade your space and try our hand maybe at some silversmithing and exchange ideas. That would be absolutely wonderful. I want to thank you all. Thank you, Rod, Michael, Nan-Nan, and Dora. I'm wondering if there are any questions here. No more questions. If there are questions, please don't hesitate to email me and I will forward them to the artist. Thank you for having been here. We went a little longer than we normally do, but I think that you'll agree that it was so fascinating and so wonderful to have the privilege of spending time with, you know, really three giants of the silversmith world. Dora, thank you so very much for creating that exhibit. That was the excuse for today. I encourage everybody to please go and view the exhibit, learn about the makers, connect with them, send them messages, tell them how much you love their work, place commission. You know, art is something that stays with you and brings you joy every day. So thank you so very much. The next In Conversation is all about ceramics during the month of April. We have 6 conversations that are going to take us from London to Cape Town, to Dewa in China, to Toronto, Vancouver. We're having again some exceptional curators and artists who are going to join us. We're even going to Paris. And when I say that, is that the conversations in April will have a travel element, in the sense that we will make sure that you have a view of the place where we are, a little bit like we did today with the artists by sending you the videos. So I hope that you're going to join us, and have a wonderful evening, rest of the day, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you again. Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.